Hi, yes, hello. I stole that from a girl I watch on YouTube. Hello, hi, yes, hello. I'm gonna stop saying it. Welcome to Art House Cinema Series 8. 8 times we've done this particular brand of film survey over the years, over my 11 or 12 years now that I've been with OSHER. I am Stacy Davies. If you are new to my class, my courses, I've been teaching a lot of film here for a long time, and art house cinema is really fun because it's I always get to show what I want. But I guess with art house cinema, there have been times that I've been, allowed to kind of show more, I don't know, unusual types of films, maybe a little more risque. I think I started getting more risque as I went along, and now I don't know, maybe I'm going back the other way. Who knows? You'll tell me, I'm sure, from this new roster of films that you should have received by now. It was attached to the Zoom meeting that Sandra sent out, so you can take a look at those films. I did make a substitution with First Cow. That was going to be our week 6 film. I really, really loved that film. So if you haven't seen it, I hope that you do. But because it was apparently screened in another course at the school, and it would be very hard to get that film the way we're doing Zoom now, because it's not for rent yet for like $3 or $4. It would be a $15 rental, and I don't want to ask you to do that. So I was kind of worried that we weren't going to get to do that one anyway. And so we do have a different film now for week 6, and I'm excited about it. It's a very interesting film, a very interesting history of the first black clown on the Parisian circus circuit. And it's only a few years old. So anyway, I found it quite fascinating and very good. So I hope you'll like that. And you get that free on Canopy. So make sure that you all get an account on Canopy. That's with a K. All you need is a library card, and they give you 10 free rentals every month. So instead of going to the library and checking out a DVD, you instead can stream directly from the Canopy site. So get that taken care of, please. And some of the other films on our list might also be on Canopy. You could search on there, and I will hopefully remember to search and let you know, because I'd rather have you not pay at all for any of the films, which is something that we'll get back to when we go live in person again later this year. I think we're going to do that. So anyway, welcome. I'm Stacy, and my intros are usually really long and rambling because that's how I roll. That's how I roll. So I originally was going to do a Canadian film series, sort of piggybacking off my Australian and New Zealand themed film series that I did over the last summer. But Canadian films are hard because there's a lot of crossover between the United States and Canada. And so I would really have to show you probably all the French Canadian films and none of the others. And I was sifting through a lot of films, and I couldn't get a handle on it. So, but there are some Canadian films that I really do want you to see at some point. So I've decided just to kind of mix them into the Art House series. So I apologize to my Canadian students. I'm not saying you don't have a film industry. I'm just saying I don't know if I can handle it because it's very obscurely unusual. Does that sound insulting? Anyway, let's see. Let's just get started. So the film that we're going to watch in our first week is titled The Grey Fox. It came out in 1982, and it is a Canadian film. I saw this film back when it was released. I didn't see it in the movie theater, but it was one of those films that I think my father was watching, and I wandered into the family room and sat down and watched a little bit, and he was very interested in film, not an artistic person, but just curious about everything. And he's the person who, especially with this film, would say things to me while we're watching, saying, look how they shot that, look at the light, look at the shadow, look at this, look at that, isn't that beautiful? And he didn't know anything about film, no technical anything. He just appreciated, beautiful visuals and storytelling. So anyway, and he recorded everything on a big giant VHS machine, VCR machine. So I got to watch these over and over and over again because, back when I was a kid, and when you were kids, there were only like 13 television channels. So anyway, I think I've seen The Gray Fox about 24 times, but I haven't seen it in decades, or I hadn't seen it in decades. And part of that reason is because they didn't put it out on DVD. They had this distributor, the Canadian distributor, just didn't make it available to the US market via streaming or DVD. So it was gone forever. And I paid not too much money for a bootleg a number of years ago. And I digitized it and put it on YouTube because I felt like people should see it. And it was getting tons of hits, thousands of hits, people reviewing it and saying, oh, I love this, I remember this film. And then I got nailed for copyright violation, and I got a strike against my account. I wasn't making any money off of it at all. I was doing it purely as a public service, the way I do everything in my life. It's just for the people. It's not for me. Anyway, then a couple years later, the distributor finally put it on streaming and put it on a DVD. So I will take credit for that completely, reminding them that this is a classic Canadian film that a lot of people really loved and would like to see again. What else here? So, like I said, I hadn't seen the film in many decades. So I watched it again the other night, and I don't know if it holds up. I think it does. Maybe I've seen it too many times. And so, for me, there are no surprises or anything like that. But anyway, you can tell me what you think. But let me just, give a caveat here and preface this by saying that it's not a typical Western film. It is, it's very simple. It's very sentimental. It's sweet. It is not action-packed, as one might assume for a Western film about a stagecoach robber turned train robbing bandit. But I think that's what makes the film so special. First of all, it was made just about 40 years ago, and Westerns have actually never been very popular films. They've always been the least popular films, and maybe in the United States, we have such a Western, we are the cowboy, right? Supposedly, like, how here when you have, Oktoberfest, everybody wears lederhosen or whatever, and all the Germans are like, we don't wear that. Well, I had a friend who was over in Sweden, and they have American Day over there, and on American Day, everyone dresses like cowboys and everybody eats hamburgers. So our country is sort of the cowboy country, right? Which is a very romantic notion, especially for people who don't live here. People who do live here, not really interested in Westerns, not so much. They've never been very popular films. They've never done very well, except for the Clint Eastwood stuff, always did. But then when we had those Westerns, they were always very violent, and, people are getting raped, and towns are being burned to the ground, and people are being hanged, and, all sorts of terrible things. It's like the wild, evil West. Well, this film is not that. And because it's based on the true story of an American bandit, Bill Miner, who was just beloved by Canadians. Canadians decided this was their guy. And I'm not Canadian. I don't know much about the country. So I'm sure there are many folklore heroes and things like that. But this is a very interesting case of a very minor, no pun intended, American bandit, Bill Miner, who the Canadians just embraced him because he lived there a couple years. He lived there, I don't know how many years, but it wasn't very long. He escaped and was like living there for a couple of years, and he gave them their first train robbery. So, That's important. And according to Canadian historians, he originated the phrase hands up. So Canadians said, that's our guy. And he was also known as the gentleman bandit. And I don't want to generalize about Canadians being so nice and all that, because every country, has its problems. And I'm sure there are mean Canadians and that they do some things that are not great to their Indigenous people, which I'm aware of, and the problems with their French-speaking people. But in general, Canadians are a bit nicer, supposedly. And so it kind of stands to reason that they would like the one bandit who was the nice guy. He's the gentleman bandit, right? Like, please, may I rob you? Thank you for your purse, madam. But actually, Bill Miner, one of the things that was great about him, kind of like Bonnie and Clyde, is that he only stole from big companies. He didn't rob little people. And there was a famous sort of quip someone said around that time up in Canada, and it was about some corporation, and the guy said, I don't care if Bill Miner rips off such and such corporation, they rip me off every single day. So it was that kind of thing, right? Bonnie and Clyde, supposedly, at least in the film, only robbed banks, and everyone's like, good, we hate the banks. They took my farm, it was the Great Depression. So Bill Miner had that kind of appeal to the general public. What else? So it's a very unique film in that way. I mean, the most unique thing about this film is that it even exists, right? Because it would have to be a Canadian production, because an American company would never make this film. There's not enough blood and gore and horribleness in it. And there isn't just this loner guy who doesn't want to make any friends and doesn't want to have any relationships, and it's just me against the world. I mean, that's an American cultural identity. And look where we are now. Good job, America. Bill Miner's a nice guy. He forms relationships and things like that, and just kind of, and doesn't. I don't think he robs, at least in the film. He doesn't rob for greed. He robs, I think, because he just likes to rob, kind of like some people like to gamble. I don't know. So it stars Richard Farnsworth, who I'm sure many of you will recognize, and he's one of my favorite actors. And what makes this film unique is that he's the lead. And Richard Farnsworth is a very notable supporting actor and character actor, but I don't know off the top of my head if he's had any big leads in films. I mean, I first saw him in the Ellen Burstyn film Resurrection, which I love, and I screened in OSHER years ago. And then I know he had a little bit part in Misery, and he's in everything. You know who he is, Richard Farnsworth. So he's an American actor. And they teamed him up with basically Canadian royalty in the form of Jackie Burroughs. And you should recognize her as well. She's been in several sort of period pieces, like TV movies and TV limited series things. I remember her as Christopher Walken's mother in The Dead Zone. And she's also in another Canadian film that I do want to show you sometime, but I don't want to depress you. And right now wasn't a good time of the pandemic. It's called Last Night. And it's about the end of the world, the last night of the end of the world. And anyway, she has Jackie Burroughs has a cameo in that. And of course, when I saw it, I'm like, freaked out because I love her so much. And it was this film that made me love her. So 12-year-old girl, I fall in love with Richard Farnsworth and Jackie Burroughs and this beautiful Canadian Western. And, I don't know if I already said this, but try to watch this on the biggest screen possible that you can. The cinematography is really nice. Now, 40 years ago, the cinematography was considered amazing, okay? And remember, there was no CGI, nothing. These are real live shots shot in Canada. And it's gorgeous. And the soundtrack was very noteworthy and celebrated as well. 40 years later, you've seen some of these shots probably, and maybe this soundtrack isn't quite as, but so you have to do with this film a little bit probably what you would do with a film from the 30s or something. You have to kind of put your mind in that context and just appreciate it. It's a character study really of this guy, and just appreciate looking at Richard Farnsworth as a lead. He's such he has such his eyes, you know. I mean, the acting is with the eyes, and he's a master at it. So it's lovely that he got to have this lead film that really took him into the hearts of both Americans and Canadians and people all over the world, really. Um, what else here? I should tell you. So Richard Farnsworth, American actor in a Canadian film about an American bandit who spent some time in Canada and was adopted by Canada. This is a perfect scenario to describe the Canadian film industry and the American film industry, which are completely intertwined. They, in fact, so much so that some in the industry refer to Canada as Hollywood North. And that's not to say that Canadians don't have their own distinct character of their films. They do, and it's very subtle. Even one of their horror films that I saw a few years ago that I love, called Pontypool. It's such a different kind of horror film. I mean, it's Canadian stuff, looks like American stuff, but it's just, I don't know, can I say smarter? The Canadians are like, yes, it's smarter somehow, and it's more subtle, it's more zen, it's more relaxed. Even their horror films are kind of more relaxed, except maybe the Saw series. Thanks for that, Canada. I haven't seen those. But there's the thing about the Canadian film industry, and I'm just tacking this on because I thought you might want to know about it since I'm not going to do a whole series on Canada. The thing about the Canadian film industry is that most of the films that you or that are celebrated from Canada are from the French language speaking part of Canada, and they call them Quebecois films. And I think I took French, Quebecois. I think I'm saying that right. Quebec, so Quebec, right? They call them Quebecers or Francophones. Or so Quebecois films are all the French language speaking films. The English speaking Canadian films are, you might not even know they're Canadian. And there's a lot of film, like some of them don't even have a Canadian identity, like Meatballs with Bill Murray, summer camp film. That's Canadian film. What was another Canadian film that was so Porky's? Porky's was a Canadian film. Thank God that wasn't an American film. I'm sorry we liked it so much, but that's Canada. That's on you guys. So, and all out of the 45 films, the 45 Canadian films that have been submitted to the Oscars, the Academy, for a nomination in Best Foreign Language Film, all of them have been French-speaking films except 2. So only 2 out of 45 were English-speaking films. So it's the French side of Canada that gets all the industry stuff. But there's a lot of like co-productions as well, like My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That's a co-production between Canada and the United States. Not Greece. No Greeks at all involved, except probably in the cast. So you might know some of the famous French Canadian films, Jesus of Montreal, or The Decline of the American Empire. I'd like to see that. I'm sure they're correct. Probably made it too soon. In fact, starting in 1984, every 10 years, the Toronto International Film Festival releases its list of the 10 best Canadian films from the previous decade. And it carries over, right? So there can be a film on the list in 1984 that's still on the list. So they just keep adding and replacing. And I'd have to say that The Grey Fox made that list from the Toronto International Film Festival in both 1984 and 1993. So it was on there for quite a long time. And then I want to give a shout out to Patricia Rozema, the director of I've Heard the Mermaids Singing, and Sarah Polley for the documentary Stories We Tell. Those also made the list, and those are the only 2 female directors that have ever been on their list. So get with the picture, Canada. What else? I guess that's sort of all about Canada, the Canadian film industry. back to the gray fox. So the gray fox fits perfectly in that scenario of this interesting intertwining, this intermingling, this hybrid between the United States and Canada. The film itself was directed by Philip Boros. It was written by John Hunter, and as I mentioned, it is based on the true story of Bill Miner, who was an American stagecoach robber who staged his first Canadian train robbery on September 10th, 1904. And I have to tell you that I don't want to leave this out. Again, Canadians love Bill Miner so much that there are products with his name on them, his image. There are restaurants, there are, I think, streets named after him. There's all sorts of stuff with Bill Miner in Canada. So I think that's really funny because he's from Kentucky. And he ended up dying in Georgia, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about his death. And I think that's it. So lastly, the film received many awards in the Genie Awards, which are the Canadian Oscars. In 1983, it was nominated for 13 awards and it won 7. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Foreign Actor for Richard Farnsworth, Best Supporting Actress for Jackie Burroughs, Best Original Screenplay, Best Art Direction, and Best Musical Score. It also received further recognition for Richard Farnsworth when he was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. I'm getting tired. Roger Ebert praised the film as, quote, a lovely adventure. It's a lovely adventure, and gave it 3.5 stars. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it a rare 100% fresh rating. Now, just remember, it's a very simple film. It's not fireworks. I know one of you is going to say, I was so bored. Why is that? That looks like it could have been on Lifetime or on cable. Well, phooey on you, because everyone loves this film. They still love it. And yes, it's old. It's 40 years old. I'm not going to say anymore. Just have fun looking at Richard Farnsworth's face, because he has such a great face, and I miss him, and I wish he were still around. So sit back, relax, have your beverage of choice, some snacks, put your feet up in your recliner, whatever, get the big TV out, unfurl the big TV, and enjoy the zen of the gray fox. Namaste.
Way down in old Kentucky, boys, on one winter's morn in 1847, old Bill Miner was born. But nothing ever suited Bill, at least that's what they say. And at the age of 13 years, one night he ran away. From a ranch to California ranch, he did his life enjoy. When asked his occupation, there he would reply, cowboy.